I mean, I was told by my film professor, there are films and there are movies. And sometimes you've got to know what you're walking into.
Yeah. See, but I come from a time when movies were films.
Deadpool 3 is almost here. And in celebration of Deadpool 3 coming to us very, very slowly, I decided to put myself through a lot of pain and struggle and trauma by going through all of the X-Men movies. Up until this point, we've dived into Deadpool from 2016, we dived into X-Men and also X2, and today we're diving into the end of this opening trilogy of this franchise, that being X-Men Last Stand. Now, if you want a true definition of this not being for the weak, it would be going through all these movies, even though I don't really want to. We're very close to X-Men First Class, but I have to chip through away at a lot of just meh and a lot of mush. Deadpool 1 was pretty good, but I've only dived into 2 of these movies, and I'm already feeling very, very sad and deprived of all my energy. X-Men Last Stand, though, I don't exactly hate. It's not good, and we're going to talk about that later. But X-Men Last Stand, I grew up with this movie. I really loved it. I really enjoyed it. It's a whole lot of fun, but objectively speaking, it's not a great movie, even in the slightest. And before talking about the movie, I want to dive into the context of this film and overall release and reception. So this movie comes right after X-Men 2, which was a, in my opinion, not so great movie, but still not terrible. And also this movie comes after Batman Begins and also Spider-Man 2. 2 incredible movies, not only comic book films, but also just great movies in general. Spider-Man 2, really masterful, really incredible, great story, great characters, all of that good stuff. Great action, all around an incredible film. And also Batman Begins, a very solid movie. That's one of my favorite, I think, movies like of all time, because that film is really well done. Really early Batman, they didn't really know what to do, but they did a really good job with what they were doing in Batman Begins. So both those movies really set a very high bar for what to expect from these movies, and X-Men did definitely not deliver on the status quo. So how did I feel about this movie going into it? I really, once again, like I said before, really loved this third X-Men movie going into it. And after I watched it again, I don't love as much as I used to, but I still have a love for it. I still have a passion for it. It's not my favorite movie of all time, but it has a place in my heart. This movie made $460.4 million against a budget of $210 million. This movie ranked number 7 on that year that it released, and it falls under Pirates of the Caribbean, Cars, Night at the Museum, and also Ice Age. An overall pretty stacked year, a lot of competition. I mean, when you're going up against Ice Age, Night at the Museum, and Cars, and Pirates of the Caribbean, those are all banger franchises. I'm really proud of it for making it inside the top 10. Over on Rotten Tomatoes, this film has a 57% critic score and a 61% audience score. Roger Ebert, one of the greatest critics to really ever do it, gave this film a 3 out of 4. I can't really sign off on this one, but he's still the GOAT, so I gotta show him some love. Roger Ebert wrote, "All the same, I enjoyed X-Men Last Stand. I like the action, I like the absurdity, I like the incongruous misuse of the mutant powers, and I especially like the way it introduces all these political issues and lets them fight it out with these special effects. Magneto would say this is all a test of survival of the fittest, and Xavier would hope they could learn to live together." That's from Roger Ebert. I'll leave the full review down below in the show notes. Definitely, I do agree this film has a lot of funness to it, a lot of dumb fun, but fun nonetheless. But that's not enough for me nowadays. Well, it depends on if it's like, Transformers Dark of the Moon or, Transformers Revenge of the Fallen. But for this, it's not really signing off for me. But it's a decent-ish film at times. Over on Letterboxd, this movie has a 2.6 average. And we have a review here from Letterboxd from Sage Lail, who gave this movie a 2.5 out of 5 stars. Sage Lail wrote, "What a weird ending. They really should have just committed to the Phoenix storyline or the Mutant War story. Otherwise, you get this muddled mess." And I can't really agree anymore with what this person really said, because this is really just wrapping up everything that I want to say into a couple of sentences right here. Because this movie, as we go into it further here in a second, it really does kind of split between 2 movies and kind of meshes them together, which just results in half-baked story on both sides and really just kind of mismanaged and mishandled story on both sides as well. Very sad, because if they went either way between a Mutant War story or a Phoenix storyline, it would have been a solid movie. This film has every right to be the best in this entire franchise so far, but it doesn't take advantage of anything at all, and it really just makes it very sad to go through. Well, with all of that egregious yap time out of the way, I'm going to go ahead and start diving into X-Men Last Stand. I'm going to try to make this one relatively quick today. I don't want to hold you guys here too long. Just get you guys out of here and go on through your day, because X-Men Last Stand, I'll face the facts. I don't really want to be here. You don't want to be here. I don't exactly want to do this episode, but I made myself promise to do all these movies for some weird reason. Let's go ahead and just dive into it.
A major pharmaceutical company has developed a way to suppress the mutant X gene permanently. They're calling it a cure.
There's nothing to cure. Nothing's wrong with any of us for that matter.
You of all people know how fast the weather can change.
Did you find what you were looking for?
The source of the cure is a mutant. More powerful than you.
Okay, so starting off here in the beginning of the movie, I really have been giving a lot of credit to the openings of these last few movies here with X-Men 1 and also X-Men 2. Starting off with Charles giving a little bit of a voiceover, it really just sets the tone for an overall pretty interesting story. Lets you know right off the jump what the themes are, the characters, the main character. It's all done pretty well here. Same with this movie, kind of. It really does set the stage for the story and also just tells all of the stakes here with this little bit of an opening. And just like how the movie is really split between two storylines, this opening right from the jump is really split between these two stories. We have the one opening with Charles and also Magneto going to recruit Jean Grey, which in my opinion, a very cool sequence, but has very bad CGI de-aging effects here that don't really work or age well in any way. But I still love this sequence. It's really well done, pretty cool, pretty well shot, and also really lets us know just how powerful Jean Grey is in this universe, and that it's going to be a really cool threat in this movie. Even though they don't really take advantage of it, they set the tone pretty nicely here with the first few minutes. And then right after that, we get an Archangel kind of origin clip here, which isn't really, I don't think, necessary. I asked myself, why is this in the movie? Because Archangel, I understand they use this just as a vessel for the second theme, being the mutant cure war story thing that I have going on. But Archangel, I think, isn't exactly the best character to do this with, since he isn't in the film that much. They only have him in maybe, I'll say, like 5 minutes of screen time just to show off this theme and, really just give him a little bit of an arc, but they don't do enough with him, which is very sad. We're not going to get any just major Archangel action until X-Men Apocalypse, a pretty cool film in my opinion. When we get there, we'll get there. But still, I think that Archangel kind of done dirty, and I think that if they aren't going to really use him, don't use him at all. So right after this opening, a theme that's been growing across these last couple films was that the CGI in the opening was really terrible and not good whatsoever. But in this movie, the CGI in that little bit of an opening with the, going through pipes and whatever is actually really good and really pleasing. That's a very strong good for me. All right, so right after that, this movie is relatively quick. It has a pretty short runtime. This film is right under 2 hours long, and it's trying to do a lot in such a small runtime for, I don't know why. Under 2 hours, you're trying to do 2 movies in one, and also we had to just flesh out all these characters, give a bunch of character arcs, introduce Beast, introduce Archangel. It's a lot going on in one tiny little film, which is another big reason why it just doesn't really work at times. This movie can at times feel just overcrowded. It feels like nothing's really getting fleshed out, or if it does get fleshed out, it's really hollow, really bland, and not done very well. But that being said, we get introduced to the mutant cure storyline here, which is, I think, a really good story to dive into with this movie. Going into a third X-Men movie, this one little story of a mutant cure takes everything from X-Men 1 and 2 and really brings it all home to a very smart and very nuanced way of concluding the storyline. I think if they decided to go with just a mutant cure story with this movie, then this X-Men movie would be one of the best X-Men films we've ever gotten. But instead, it's kind of half-baked. They decided to shoehorn in Jean Grey, and it didn't really work at all. This mutant cure is a really cool and just really fun way to tackle a third X-Men film, but they didn't do it in a smart way, which is really sad. And right after that, speaking of Jean Grey and Scott Summers, Jean Grey and Scott Summers done incredibly dirty and done so wrong in this movie. I mean, Jean Grey is a really shallow and really hollow version of what a Phoenix movie and a Phoenix storyline should be. Now, once again, I say a lot on this podcast, I don't read comics by any means whatsoever, but outside looking in, I can definitely see that this story of Jean Grey and the Phoenix Force should definitely be a lot bigger than what it is in this movie. I do know that in the comics and other iterations, this is just more of a massive story, a very big story involving all of Marvel. And just that being said, they don't have access to Spider-Man or the Avengers or anything, so it can't be a big Avengers level threat. But still, this is supposed to be a really big storyline. They tried it in this movie, but it feels like it was just sold to just sell tickets and sell toys instead of actually being a very fleshed out story. So Jean Grey done incredibly dirty, but the biggest and just dirtiest dirty that a character has ever been done in cinematic history is Scott Summers and Cyclops in this film, being done so terribly wrong that he has under 4 minutes of screen time in a final climactic ending to an X-Men film. Cyclops has a total of 3 minutes and 45 seconds of screen time in X-Men Last Stand, which is just absolutely pitiful for this character. And we're going to get into it later on with Buzz from the Backlot, but I'll just tap into a little bit here. Apparently, Cyclops was supposed to have a bigger story and more of a bigger role in the film, but he had scheduling conflicts and they just had to shoehorn in his death less than 30 minutes into the movie, which is just absolutely terrible. I hate to see that happen. And that's really upsetting because I love James Marsden, and really him as Cyclops should be just a no-brainer, just an absolute amazing fleshed out character, but they did him so dirty. They didn't really know what to do with Cyclops, clearly, and they didn't do a good job of fleshing it out. And what resulted is a very half-baked story, which makes you really sad. Makes you want to cry, but I'm not going to. And just overall with the whole Jean Grey, Scott Summers, and also the mutant cure, they're weaving between two very big stories that it doesn't really allow either of them to really just grow and spread their wings to be a great story. So later on in the movie, we see that Jean Grey kills Scott Summers, and then she gets brought back to the X-Men mansion. She breaks out, goes back to her childhood home, and then we have this really cool, in my opinion, exorcist scene that mirrors the opening of the movie. That's kind of half-baked, but kind of cool at the same time. A pretty cool story. The CGI here is really bad, though. I didn't make that in my notes, but something to note here is that the CGI in this movie, and also Origins of Wolverine, I already watched Origins of Wolverine. Both these movies back-to-back have just terrible CGI for, I don't even know why. But whatever, we have this cool little exorcist scene of Jean Grey, and we have Magneto and also Xavier come there, mirrors the opening, and Charles Xavier dies in this scene, which feels very weird. For some reason, it doesn't feel right when I see that Charles Xavier dies in like less than half of the movie. He's already dead. That feels weird. Doesn't feel earned. It doesn't feel like they're doing a very good death for such a big character in this movie. He doesn't actually die, though, because he comes back to life in the very end, which is weird and confusing. And it's apparently supposed to be his twin brother in the end of the film that he revives back into. And his twin brother was apparently inside of a coma when he revived back into his twin brother to come back to life as Charles Xavier. A very stupid way to do that, but whatever. Days of Future Past storyline will fix all of this, I hope. But whatever, it is what it is. Charles Xavier has a very half-baked and stupid death in this movie, but everything in this film is half-baked except for Ellen Page, which is the love of my life. Early 2000s Ellen Page is like one of the most beautiful women to walk the earth. I'll just say it as it is. I don't even care. I had an absolute crush on her growing up, and obviously now that can't really work out for reasons that you already know why. But in this movie, it's her versus Anna Paquin. Iceman is not really, I guess, going for Ellen Page, but he seemingly is. And Anna Paquin gets a little jealous, and she decides to go and take the mutant cure, which is a decision that I think is reasonable to be upset by, because she is such a big character in this movie and this trilogy that I would have wanted to see Anna Paquin's character as Rogue in the final battle. But I think it's understandable that if there is a mutant cure, that her character of Rogue in this universe would most likely take it in a heartbeat. And it's definitely a choice that I think could have been done better and just done in a better way to give her character more of a moment, since she's like one of the more crucial and, you know, real foundational characters with this trilogy. She could have been done better, but at the end of the day, it's a just understandable decision for a character to make. And from a writing standpoint, I would do it, but not in this way, but I would still do this decision, so I'm not that mad. Once again, this mutant cure and mutant war storyline proves to be the most intriguing way to tell this third movie. You don't need Jean Grey. I mean, Jean Grey could maybe have not died in the second film and still be in this one, and then in a potential fourth movie, you go and decide to do a Dark Force storyline with Phoenix Force, but I think a mutant cure storyline with the third film would be so much better, so much more nuance, so much more characters as well. It would have just been a better movie overall, and I wouldn't be mad at it whatsoever for being less of an action movie, more of a psychological, confrontational kind of movie instead of more of an action flick, which is really sometimes a better option than this. Okay, so at this point in the movie, we got Beast, and we also have Jean Grey, who is a really watered down Dark Phoenix kind of storyline in this movie. In a lot of the film, she just stands on a rock, or just sits inside of a hospital bed, or just stares blankly into the abyss, which is I don't know if it's exactly comic accurate interpretation of this story, but it's definitely boring way to do it, in a way that's just not very exciting. But that being said, with a very watered down Dark Phoenix storyline, we are going into the third act, which is an incredible third act, one of the coolest in this entire franchise, and I have been loving this third act since I was a little boy, and even today, at 20 years old, I still love it. All right, I'm just going to kind of rapid fire through this third act and the rest of this film because it's kind of whack and kind of lame, but the third act is the highlight of this entire film. Number one, this third act is absolutely lit AF. The suits are absolutely awesome. The stakes are all there. This feels like a true third and final climactic third act in an X-Men film that I've been wanting since X-Men 1 back in 2000. The suits are really cool. I love the design. It's not exactly corny. We don't have the blue and yellow and black and the corny Wolverine mask. It looks cool. It looks more mature. It looks really like a moderner X-Men suit take, which is a lot better than the previous iterations and before. The action is slapping. The action slaps in every single sequence. Everyone has their moment, from Cyclops, Wolverine, Beast, Storm, Iceman, whoever. They all have their moment in this movie, and in this third act specifically, the third act's action is really actiony and really fun and awesome. And also, Wolverine and Beast is so much fun together. I didn't think I exactly needed to have both these characters on screen together because they're just so much fun. They're an absolute delight together. They're so aggressive and dominant. It's like having Shaq and Shaq on the court together. Two Shaqs, but on the same battlefield. It's absolutely insane and crazy and just a fun way to watch the movie. I need more of this as we go into a new wave of X-Men movies. Give me a spin-off just between Wolverine and Beast together, because that is just everything that I ever wanted for and hope for and need inside of an X-Men movie. Give me a 5-hour cut of just these two characters and I will happily take it, because this is just really everything to me. We're going to be getting more of them together as we go into X-Men Days of Future Past, but for now, this is all we got, and I'm really happy with it. Also in my notes is Ellen Page. I love Ellen Page. Specifically in this movie, I'm in love with her. That's all I gotta say. Archangel has his moment, which is pretty cool, and also we have Iceman versus Pyro, and this is an incredible fight scene. It's so freaking cool. Oh my gosh. I love these two characters, but Iceman versus Pyro is just, I think, one of the best fights in cinematic history. I'll say it. This may be a little bit recency bias, maybe a little bit of nostalgia, but I don't care. And also we have Wolverine still being the golden boy of this whole entire franchise. This really feels like it's his movie, and he has to kill Jean Grey, which is a very sad moment that we'll be going into deeper as we get into Wolverine. And also when we get into Logan, we'll be getting really seeing the effects of Logan's mental health in that movie. But it's a very sad moment. It does, in retrospect, feel weird because this relationship didn't really ever develop into anything, and even this death feels hollow, and it feels really mid to have this happen, and you try to pretend like this is an earned moment of Wolverine killing Jean Grey, but I feel like I've seen them talk to each other maybe like 6 times, and that really isn't enough for me to really care about these characters. And the moment here that's shared in the final battle of him having to kill her doesn't feel like anything to me. And overall, besides that, it's an overall pretty mid ending after that. The third act is cool, but the ending is mid. It feels awkward. It feels like a lot happened with this film behind the scenes, and it's clearly just a lot of just divisive stuff, a lot of just creatives at the writing room table not knowing what to do and doing it in a really weird and bad way. And what resulted is X-Men Last Stand. I don't know that exactly for sure, but I think outside looking in, you can definitely tell that something clearly went wrong here. Something went wrong, or something just kind of got rewritten, kind of got rushed out, and what resulted was a overall pretty mediocre and just kind of mid movie. I still love it. This movie still has a place in my heart, but sadly, it's not there. Well, that wraps up the feature presentation for X-Men Last Stand, but don't go anywhere quite yet. It's time for us to go into our superlatives, really the most fun inside the entire episode, and also our MVP gets unveiled at the very end of the episode. You're definitely not going to miss that. This is overall the most fun out of the entire episode that you're going to have here.
Don't you know who I am? I'm the Juggernaut, bitch!
All right, let's go ahead and dive into our superlatives. We're going to go ahead and try to get through these relatively quickly, a little bit behind on time. First off, what is our first award? What was the best scene in the movie? What was the scene stealer for X-Men Last Stand? Once again, like I said, overall a pretty mediocre film. Not a lot of good here, but the third act is the scene stealer. The third act is a whole lot of fun. I absolutely love this third act. It hits every single time. What is the best quote? What is my favorite quote of X-Men Last Stand? The best quote of the movie comes from Magneto, who is for some reason always spitting bars in every single film in this franchise. Magneto says, "Charles Xavier did more for mutants than you will ever know. My single greatest regret is that he had to die for our gene to live." Now, the only reason I love that quote is because it makes the film sound like it got an Oscar nomination. Even though X-Men Last Stand's pretty mid, and I don't think it got any kind of Oscar nomination, that one little quote makes it seem like it deserved an Academy Award, even though it didn't. I'll admit the movie's not that good, I don't really like it whatsoever, but that one little quote gives me some optimism. What is one small change I would make to X-Men Last Stand? Well, it's pretty simple. I would either A, remove the Mutant War storyline, or B, remove the Jean Grey storyline. You can't have both in this movie. You got to pick between one or the other. Either way, this movie is probably going to be pretty mid, but I think if you just remove one and focus on whichever one is left, it's going to be a pretty solid flick. If you decide to just follow the Mutant Cure storyline, it would be a really solid interpretation for an X-Men movie. Or B, if you decide to go with the Jean Grey storyline, it takes a lot more work, but you can definitely do it if you just focus on that alone. But instead, they didn't do that, which resulted, once again, in an overall mess of a movie, which is pretty sad. What is Double Trouble? What's a good double feature for this movie? I say you should first go into Spider-Man 2 from 2004 and then go inside of this movie, X-Men Last Stand. I want you to feel really hyped after watching Spider-Man 2 and have a lot of love for the superhero genre. Then right after you watch that, go into X-Men Last Stand and have all that love for the X-Men ripped out of your body, because this movie, once again, pretty mediocre, pretty mid, pretty trash. Also, Spider-Man 2 is supposed to be in theaters next week Monday, if you don't know somehow. Then, as time of this recording, next week Monday, it will be in theaters, which you should definitely hop into. I may or may not, but we'll see. If this movie was a song, what would it be? I say it is Love Song by Sarah Bareilles. That's from early 2000s. You know that one song that goes, "I'm not going to write you a love song if you ask for it"? That's what this is. I'm not going to exactly sing it. I don't want to get sued, but, you know, it's a banger song from 2000s, and that was just the overall vibe of this movie. I'm not going to write you a love song, and clearly you didn't, because this movie freaking sucks. Before we go, we have a couple more things here to dive into. One of those things being Buzz from the Backlot. What exactly is Buzz from the Backlot? Let's say you're at a dinner party, or you're eating dinner with the in-laws, or you're at church, or whatever, or graduation. I don't care where you're at, but you have to give off some fun facts, some cool, fun film knowledge. That's how you make friends. That's how you make a life. That's how you find your future partner, is by giving away cool film fun facts. And that's exactly what I have for you today. And I have 3 here for you. Some 3 kind of cool and kind of fun facts for you to dive into regarding X-Men Last Stand. Our first thing going into Buzz from the Backlot is that this film was budgeted at $210 million. And this was, at the time, the most expensive movie ever made. That is right. Somehow, at a point in time, X-Men Last Stand was the most expensive movie ever made, and we never got an Over the Hedge 2. That's pretty sad stuff. Our second boast in the backlot is that Mystique's actress Rebecca Roman and also Cyclops actor James Marsden roles were reduced substantially just because they had to rush the production, and the 2 cast members had prior scheduling conflicts. So once again, I kind of predicted this before. Clearly, there was something going on behind the scenes of this movie, just kind of creatively. I don't think there was any kind of drama, but clearly something went wrong. Clearly something was kind of rushed. This movie was definitely pretty rushed. I think that you could definitely tell the way that Cyclops and Mystique's stories end in this movie, there was supposed to be more. There could have been more greaterness to their characters, and the way they wrapped up those stories could have been just more earned and more felt and more respect to them. But that didn't really happen. And for our last bust in the backlot, Kelsey Grammer was so keen to play Beast that he agreed to do an audition. And at this time, this was the first time he had ever auditioned for a role in 20 years. And I have to admit, something that I didn't really mention here, Kelsey Grammer was pretty good as Beast. A really fun time. I wish he really stuck around with Beast. I think he's going to be the new Beast moving forward in the MCU. Don't quote me, but if you watch Captain Marvel, actually, none of you did. Never mind. You didn't watch Miss Marvel, or the Marvels, sorry. None of you watched the Marvels, but he, I think, was in the ending of that movie. I think so. It was that model, at least. I don't know, but he was so pretty good in this movie, and I would love to see him more in the MCU. Love the voice, love the physique and the physicality of that role there. Not going CGI, he definitely deserves more respect for this role, and he did a pretty good job. Well, that's Buzz in the Backlot. Thank you for joining us for that little quick segment. And for our last award of the entire night, we have the MVP. And for our MVP nominees, this is really these characters and these actors who really just showed up for this movie. This movie would not be as good without our MVP. This actor or actress was really the highlight of the entire film, and I have such a strong love for them. And for our 5 nominees for the MVP, we have Hugh Jackman. Hugh Jackman as Wolverine, he is really the GOAT, and he definitely just earned his flowers in this movie, and also going into Origins and also Wolverine and also Logan, he really stuck around with this character, and I have so much love for him because if you were any other actor, you would go somewhere else. I mean, he got to work with Christopher Nolan, and he still chose to stick with Wolverine. That shows you he really cared about this role, cared about this character, and I love him for that. Our second nominee is Ian McKellen, who can never seem to miss. Really just performed badly one time, I beg of you. Our third nominee is Patrick Stewart. He died pretty early on in the film, but I still really love Patrick Stewart. This wouldn't be an MVP race if he wasn't somewhere edge inside of here. Our fourth nominee is Halle Berry, who was pretty good in this movie. I didn't really mention it, but Halle Berry's character as Storm has more to do. I love her character so much more in this movie. She gives off this sense of leadership and responsibility and this aura that is just really couldn't have been done any better if it wasn't for Halle Berry, and I really appreciate her for that. She did really good. She definitely cooked here. And our final 5th nominee is Aaron Stanford's performance as Pyro. Once again, I'm a Pyro fan for life. This is his second nomination back-to-back with 2 films. And he's really good in this movie. I didn't think I would be this much of a die-hard Pyro fanboy, but here I am. Aaron Stanford is going to be in the new Deadpool film as Pyro once again. He'll probably die within like 5 minutes of the movie, but I hope he doesn't. Pyro and also Aaron Stanford, they're heating up a little bit, no pun intended. And with all that out of the way, our incredible nominees, all 5 of them are absolutely incredible, but only one can be our MVP. And our MVP today is once again Hugh Jackman, the GOAT himself. There's no one else who could really be an MVP besides Hugh Jackman. And just like last time, Hugh Jackman sadly could not come to the studio today. We're going to mail it out to him. He was pretty busy. He said that next time he'll be here, maybe. He'll actually try, but right now he's in Australia doing stuff. So he said he'll be back. All right, mate? Our final score for X-Men Last Stand is an F+. This movie is not good, and sadly an F+ is really the best score I can give to it. A very modest and kind of strong F+, but an F+ nonetheless. My big question for you today is, can the X-Men be good again? And this is a really interesting question because the MCU seems to be at a very weird decline right now that I don't really see that the X-Men can kind of build back up. Maybe, I think if we go into Deadpool versus Wolverine and we kind of ride that hype a little bit, then we go into Captain America and also Thunderbolts and also Fantastic Four. If those films are really good, then we can kind of ride that hype into an Avengers movie, then kind of reset everything into an X-Men universe. But who knows? It's like, at that point, like 8 years on the line, and who's going to really care about the X-Men in like 8 years? Me, a little bit, but will the average audience member really care about it? Who knows? So let me know what you think. You can answer that question over on Spotify, but if you're not on Spotify, so let me know. Well, thank you for listening to this episode of the Court of Cinema podcast. You mean so much more to me than you really do know. Make sure you share the show, leave a review on the show. It keeps the lights on, it keeps the fridge full. None of this is really possible without you, and I want to thank you for that. And if you are new here, then I'm sorry you had to listen to this episode on X-Men Last Stand. I apologize. I didn't make the movie. I'm just here to cover it a little bit. But, you know, I tried my hardest to make it a little bit fun for you. So I'm sorry if you're new here. But if you're not new here, then, you know, this is how we do it around here, I guess. The next episode in this series will be X-Men Origins Wolverine, which I'm not too happy for. I'm not going to lie to you, but it is what it is. And after that, in the next couple of weeks, we're going to be going into Over the Hedge, one of my favorite movies of all time. And also that's going to be our 1-year celebration for the show. It's been 1 year of this podcast being out, and I didn't think I'd make it this far, but somehow I'm still here. I thought I quit after like a month, but I'm here a year later somehow. I'm still here for you for a pretty long time. Until whenever those episodes drop again, leave those post notifications on to know when we drop. Follow us on all of our socials. Stay swagged out, stay cool, watch more movies like every single day. That's really important. And until next time, I'm your host Logan, and I'll see you guys in the movies.